In this video, I'll set up a still life and draw it with pencil, pen, and charcoal. It's a good idea to take reference photos as well. Be sure to experiment with lighting. This is just moving the desk lamp around. Light reveals the form through the way value changes on the surface. The overhead light is the least interesting, like this. And here we're getting towards the dramatic sunset view. This is what I drew. My still life is right on my desk, so you can see what I'm looking at. When I began this drawing, I more or less defined the outside edges of where the shapes were first. Sketching this out took me 10 minutes, and I know that because that's how much video I had. This part is in real time, and the next few clips are going to be sped up 4 times just to make the video shorter. I think it's important for you to see how fast I actually draw. I'm really looking at the still life more than I'm looking at the paper. So I glance back and forth, and what I'm really doing is trying to understand the relationships between the parts. I'll go from drawing one object to the next, and then go back and redefine where the outside edges of the objects are. I know you can't see the lines very easily, but watch where the end of the pencil goes, and take a look at how I'm holding it. Also, notice that my pinky is riding on the surface to help control how dark I'm drawing. Here we begin the sped up video, and you'll notice that I'm drawing a little bit darker, and I'm correcting things as I go with the eraser. I'm really just drawing a framework of the objects that I'll later go in and render with values. And you'll notice that I start to draw the objects as if they're transparent, as if you can see right through them. And I'll extend lines from vertical and diagonal surfaces, and you'll see that I'm trying to make edges parallel to one another. This helps to make the space believable. I'm looking at the still life, but I'm beginning to work on making the drawing space itself make sense. The circle of the blue painter's tape really threw me off. I know that it's an ellipse, and it's also in perspective, and in the final drawing I got neither one of those things correct. But it still looks more or less like what I was looking at, so I'm okay with that. You can see me going back and forth trying to figure it out, and I don't think I ever did, but that's okay. The drawing still looks correct. We've shifted back to real time here, and I'm again drawing with X-ray vision to try and make sense of the way these curves go. Inside the roll of tape there's writing, so I'm trying to figure out how that works. When I'm not sure if something's correct or not, I'll just leave it and go draw some other area, and then I'll come back and decide later if I like what I've done or not. It's best not to just keep changing the same thing over and over. You need to step back. Here I'm starting to draw in where the shadows fall. This is really important, and I'm indicating highlights. I used this sketch as the starting point for each of my drawings. I drew this 3 times just to show you different drawing tools. In this pencil drawing, I'm going to begin just like I did with the value scale. I drew in the midtones first and then the shadows. These values are built up by just scribbling back and forth. You can see that lines follow the planes in the regular objects, and in the background I just kind of scribble back and forth. What I'm most interested in is the value that I'm developing. Don't draw details yet. Just figure out where the areas of midtone, light, and dark values go first. Edges of objects are defined by value shifts. The lines that I started with are more or less just disappearing as the values are placed next to them. As I'm developing value, I'm also starting to establish some textures on the surfaces. I'm starting to smudge the graphite with my hand, so it's probably a good idea to just put a clean piece of paper between your hand and the drawing surface. I use the eraser to bring back the white highlights of the paper. I'll do the next drawing with pen and develop value through line. Some of this is sped up. This is how fast I really draw. Indicating textures on objects is a really good way to develop the value that you need. Some of the lines follow the contour of the forms and some lines don't. I was a little bit arbitrary in these decisions, and I probably would do this differently if I were to do it again. In this last drawing, I'm going to use vine charcoal and then smudge it. Note how I'm holding the charcoal and how this shifts. And you can probably tell I'm doing the same thing again. Establish midtones and shadows first. Work over the whole drawing surface. Don't concentrate in just one area. In this sped up section, you can see that I started blending with the paper stump, but quickly switched to using my finger and the eraser. I just think this works easier for me. I draw a lot with the eraser. Once I blended the first layer, I had to go back to establish darker values. There's less detail or physical texture in this drawing. I'm interested in getting the values correct, and you can see that where one object is against the other and the values are the same, there's no line between them. I hope that by drawing the same still life 3 different ways, I've given you a good starting point for your own drawings.